It's Wednesday, February 5th. I'm Jane Coaston, and this is What A Day, the show that liked reporting the news better when the world wasn't in total and complete chaos every single day. On today's show, President Trump drafts an executive order to dismantle the Department of Education, and the Proud Boys are humbled by a D.C. Superior Court judge. But let's start with Trump 2.0's foreign policy. And I'll admit, I don't really know what it is. Let's take those tariffs, for example. As we discussed in the show earlier this week, Trump threatened tariffs against Canada, Mexico, and China. He delayed tariffs against Canada and Mexico for at least the next 30 days, but the tariffs against China have gone into effect. In response, China announced Tuesday that it will place tariffs on American coal, gas, agricultural machinery, and large engine cars that will start next Monday. We're in a tariff war with China, in other words. But I keep coming back to one thing. Trump has been all over the place as to what he thinks tariffs mean. Are they super awesome in how America got rich in the early 20th century? Or are they terrible, and thus great negotiation tactics you don't actually want to use, like with Canada and Mexico? They can't be both. And that pretty much goes for how all of Trump's foreign policy works. He wants everything, in all the ways, all the time, and he really doesn't care who gets hurt in the process. He's destroying the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID, with the help of Elon Musk. And on Tuesday, during a joint press conference with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he said that he wants Palestinians to leave Gaza, and then took it a step further.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area.
Guys, are we Iraq warring again, but weirder?
I don't want to be cute. I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be so bad. This could be so magnificent.
This has all happened in just around 2 weeks. And if you're having a hard time keeping up, that makes two of us. So to help me get a better understanding of all that's going on, I spoke with Ben Rhodes. He's the former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Obama and co-host of Pod Save the World. He stopped by the studio to chat. Ben, welcome back to What A Day.
Happy to be here.
So before Trump sat down with Netanyahu, he said Palestinians had, quote, no alternative but to leave Gaza because of the level of devastation there. Can you explain why statements like these are so politically explosive? Because they are.
Yes. Well, the Palestinians in Gaza, who should be the people who decide where they live, do not want to leave Gaza because they believe with a lot of justification that if they leave, they'll never be able to return home. Because that's been the story of the Palestinian people, including the millions of Palestinians who are refugees in countries like Lebanon and Jordan today. So they don't want to leave. Also, the countries, Egypt and Jordan, that he's suggested could take Palestinian refugees from Gaza do not want to do so for different reasons. Both of them don't have a lot of resources, don't have a lot of money, don't have a lot of capacity to absorb, up to 2 million people. So nobody wants this solution except Trump and probably almost certainly the Israeli right wing, which wants to depopulate Gaza and settle it as Israeli territory.
So far, the temporary ceasefire has been holding. What roadblocks do you see ahead as we get closer to the end of the first 6-week phase of the deal?
The roadblocks are that there's actually no mutual understanding about whether the ceasefire means an end to the war itself. Netanyahu has not been willing to say that this is the end of the war. It's just to get the hostages back. And his right wing very much does not want to see the end of the war. They want to be able to go back into Gaza, continue military operations. And there's also the question of, even if there's not a return to the scale of fighting and bombardment of Gaza we saw before, who administers Gaza? Who's in charge of Gaza? Who governs Gaza? Israel would like to have full control over Gaza's security, and Palestinians obviously don't want that. Medium and long-term questions are totally unresolved. The question is, can we get through these hostage releases, prisoner exchanges before things unravel, or will there be some later kick the can fight over what comes next?
Moving on to the tariff showdown from this week, I was struck by how both Canada and Mexico didn't really have to do anything. Like, Mexico sent troops to the border in 2019, and Canada announced in December their plans for a $1.3 billion border security bill. Why do you think Trump ultimately paused his plans to impose 25% tariffs on goods from Mexico and Canada when he didn't really get anything anyway?
I think that it was a combination of the fact that thus far, and this could change, a lot of this noise around tariffs seems to be about winning news cycles in the United States. I think the other piece of this is there was a negative stock market reaction, as one would expect there to be, to the imposition of a massive amount of tariffs. Maybe he didn't want to take that hit to the stock market, which he seems to care about a bit. But we just don't know. This could come back up again in 30 days. And I'll tell you, the strangest thing to me about all this is it's unusual to begin with to threaten tariffs for kind of non-economic reasons, right? So in this case, migration and fentanyl are the reasons he keeps coming back to. But even in that framing, I can at least see what he's asking, I guess, Mexico to do, do more to secure the border and stop the flow of people and fentanyl across the border. Canada, there's no problem with that there.
Right. And I think there are a couple things that strike me about this. And one is that he seems to be at cross purposes with himself. The writer Charles C.W. Cook made the point that he simultaneously seems to think that tariffs are amazing, they're super great, and that we were at our best when we had high tariffs against pretty much everybody. Also, tariffs are clearly terrible, so that they're a negotiation tactic that you wouldn't actually ever use. So do you think Trump will ultimately impose these tariffs, or does he just want to use them as leverage because they're terrible and yet also amazing?
I think he will use the tariffs against China in the near term. China is a hugely consequential global economy in a way that Mexico and Canada aren't. And they've proven willing to kind of withstand a certain amount of economic pain to stand up to the United States. Whenever there's something that any country does that Trump doesn't like, I think I would expect him to threaten tariffs. And that includes, allies like Europe. The problem with this that people should understand is the rest of the world is going to adjust to this by trying to de-risk their own economies from the United States. In other words, they're going to start trading with each other.
Right. And I think that goes to, we've been watching the public dismantling of the U.S. Agency for International Development. Yeah. Can you explain what USAID does and what it means for the country's reputation abroad?
Yeah, USAID is the global humanitarian and development organization for the U.S. government. Spends up to $60 billion a year around the world. This matters in several ways. Let's just start from the premise that all food and health assistance and emergency humanitarian assistance that the U.S. government provides is through USAID. If you have any kind of conscience, you should expect that the richest, most powerful country in the world does something when there's a genocide in Sudan, does something when there's a famine somewhere. So you should care for humanitarian purposes. Full stop. If you don't, you should also care for self-interested purposes. So USAID is doing programming in places like Iraq and Syria as part of the counter-ISIS mission, right? You don't just take out ISIS, you try to build security forces, try to build institutions that can fill that space. Any counterterrorism mission the United States has a USAID component normally to try to bring about a modicum of stability. And then lastly, it's kind of like the tariff issue. China spends a significant amount of money on international development. They build government buildings, they build roads, they build ports, they build infrastructure. They bring a lot that other people want. And the United States, usually through USAID, brings capacity. We're going to help you build your healthcare sector. We're going to help you figure out how to feed your people more efficiently. If we are out of the development business, absolutely, that void is going to be filled by China, by Russia, by hopefully by Europe, I'd like to think. But if you're supplementing your dismantlement of USAID with threats to seize the Panama Canal and calling people from Africa, whatever he's calling them now, they can't come here, canceling exchange programs. We're going through the most rapid decline I can think of through these steps that Trump is taking.
I think that goes to my next question, which is that I've always really tried to work to break through what Trump says and think about what Trump does. But it's getting really hard when he keeps talking about making Canada the 51st state and demanding Denmark give Greenland to the U.S. and taking back the Panama Canal, as you mentioned. How should we be thinking about these kinds of comments? Because he keeps saying this.
Look, I think that there's, in the hierarchy of Trump, there's the things he does, right? Like USAID, we just talked about. He's doing that. Then there are the things he repeats. I mean, I think this is kind of important. Like this Greenland and Panama fixation, there's been a repetition to it. Secretary of State Marco Rubio's first trip was to Panama. He had a phone call with the Prime Minister of Denmark that all reporting suggests it was a very bad phone call, and he was very threatening. So I do take the Greenland and, to some extent, Panama threats quite seriously because he's kind of acting on them. He seems to want to leave office with some new piece of America somewhere in the world. Canada, that kind of feels more like trolling to me.
I know we're only somehow 2 weeks into Trump's second term. But taken together, it's been interesting how Trump 2.0 seems far more maximalist on foreign policy than I expected. What do you think all of this says about where foreign policy is going over the next 4 years?
To me, I think America First has never been necessarily the isolationism that some people describe it as. And essentially, America is the world's largest rogue state. I mean, that I always used to think of that as somewhat of a problematic term, but it kind of applies in the sense that we're just a state that is going to do whatever the hell we want.
Ben, as always, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks. We'll see what the next 2 weeks hold. Yeah.
We'll get to more of the news in a moment, but if you like the show, make sure to subscribe, leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and share with your friends. More to come after some ads. What A Day is sponsored by Books. People, Valentine's Day is not the time to wing it with gifts. You need a solid game plan. Send foolproof flowers from the Books Company and wow your Valentine, and get 25% off your entire purchase. Books makes it simple. Choose the Quickie Book with the click of a button, get their best-selling bouquet right on time for Valentine's Day. It's the Quickie they'll brag about for weeks. Or pick from their collection of unique modern designs or go for their flower subscription, the #1 life partner life hack, and be the hero every month. You really can't go wrong. Bouquets aren't just any flowers. Their flowers are cut fresh from where they grow best, so you get bigger, brighter blooms that last longer. Some are even grown on the side of a volcano. They'll be blown away by how stunning they are. Valentine's Day is February 14th, right after the big game, so don't fumble the flowers. Get your order in now. Go to Books.com and use my promo code WAD for 25% off. That's BOUQS.com, promo code WAD. Books, promo code WAD.
The yeas are 77, the nays are 23, and the nomination is confirmed.
On Tuesday, the Senate confirmed Doug Collins, President Trump's nominee for Secretary of Veterans Affairs, and Pam Bondi, his nominee for U.S. Attorney General. As of now, 11 of Trump's cabinet picks have been confirmed. 2 of the president's other nominees inched closer to confirmation on Tuesday. The Senate Finance Committee voted to advance the nomination of Secretary of Health and Human Services nominee Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a man who believes that AIDS is caused by poppers. It isn't. It was unclear if Kennedy had enough Republican support to pull it off. Republican Senator and committee member Bill Cassidy of Louisiana was one of many lawmakers who grilled Kennedy during his confirmation hearings last week. But Cassidy ultimately threw his support behind Kennedy. Things are also looking pretty good for Director of National Intelligence nominee Tulsi Gabbard. The Senate Intelligence Committee advanced her nomination on Tuesday. 2 Republican senators on the committee initially said they were undecided on Gabbard after her contentious confirmation hearings last week, but they backed her in the end. The Senate will vote on whether or not to confirm Kennedy and Gabbard in the coming days. The Trump administration is preparing to issue yet another extreme executive order that could dismantle the Department of Education. Fun! This was one of Trump's big campaign promises. And it should be noted that presidents can't just get rid of entire departments with the flick of a Sharpie. They have to go through Congress. But according to the Washington Post, this upcoming executive order seeks to significantly weaken the Department of Education. Employees from Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, are reportedly working within the agency to find ways to cut costs. This could mean shrinking the department's workforce or even eliminating federal scholarship programs that have anything to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's unclear what that would leave Linda McMahon, Trump's nominee for Secretary of Education, to do if confirmed. Her Senate confirmation hearings haven't been scheduled yet. The executive order is set to be introduced later this month.
Elon Musk wants everyone in America to be at the mercy of Elon Musk.
On Tuesday, Senate Democrats sent a letter to the Government Accountability Office asking why the heck Elon Musk and his worker bees have access to the Treasury Department's payment systems. Senators Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts and Ron Wyden of Oregon asked the congressional watchdog for an investigation into Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. He reportedly gave Musk's Doge team access to the federal system last week. At a rally Tuesday, Warren laid it out pretty plainly.
Musk has grabbed control of America's payment system. Yes. This is the system that makes sure that your grandpa gets his Social Security check on time. This is the system that makes sure that your mom's doctor gets paid for her Medicare exam. Elon Musk wants the power to turn that on, to turn that off, as Elon Musk decides.
The Treasury Department said in a letter Tuesday that Musk's team only has access to read the system. But Wired magazine reported that at least one member of the Doge team has administrative privileges on payment information. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries also introduced legislation to, quote, prevent unlawful meddling in the Treasury Department's payment systems and protect Americans across the country. Democrats warn that Musk's unelected involvement in the federal government is unprecedented. The Proud Boys are on the market for a new name. On Monday, a D.C. Superior Court judge took control of the trademark and gave it to a black church that was vandalized in 2020 by members of the far-right group. Under the ruling, the group is barred from selling merchandise with the Proud Boys name unless given consent by the Metropolitan African Methodist Episcopal Church. Finally, some consequences. The group's so-called leader, Enrique Tarrio, said on Twitter that the judge should be impeached and the church's nonprofit status should be revoked. Tarrio wrote, quote, I hold in contempt any motions, judgments, and orders issued against me. In response, I wrote, I don't care. And that's the news. That's all for today. If you like the show, make sure you subscribe, leave a review, figure out a way to slow down the news cycle, and tell your friends to listen. And if you're into reading and not just about how seriously, let's just all take a few days off making news. I can finally get into my pie baking era. Like me, What a Day is also a nightly newsletter. Check it out and subscribe at crooked.com/subscribe. I'm Jane Coaston, and this is all a lot to take in.